Foreign policy refers to the strategies and approaches a country takes in conducting its relations with other nations and actors on the world stage. For the United States, formulating an effective foreign policy is crucial for advancing its national interests, promoting its values and ideals, and maintaining its position as a global superpower. The making of foreign policy involves a complex interplay of various actors, tools, and challenges. At the heart of U.S. foreign policy lies the pursuit of national security, safeguarding the nation's territorial integrity, citizens, and vital interests from external threats. However, modern foreign policy encompasses a broader range of goals, including economic prosperity through favorable trade relationships, the promotion of democratic values and human rights, and addressing global issues like climate change and pandemics. Shaping foreign policy, key players. The primary architect of U.S. foreign policy is the President, who serves as the head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The President is advised by the National Security Council, which includes the Vice President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and other key officials. The Department of State, led by the Secretary of State, plays a crucial role in conducting diplomacy and managing the nation's diplomatic corps, which includes ambassadors stationed in countries around the world. While the President holds significant authority in foreign affairs, Congress also plays a vital role. The Senate must provide advice and consent for the ratification of treaties, and both chambers of Congress have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, declare war, and appropriate funds for international programs and activities. Interest groups such as business associations, human rights organizations, and ethnic lobbies also seek to influence foreign policy decisions by lobbying policymakers and shaping public opinion. Public opinion itself can be a powerful force, as it can constrain or embolden policymakers' choices on international issues. Tools of foreign policy implementation. The United States employs a variety of tools to pursue its foreign policy objectives, ranging from diplomatic negotiations to economic statecraft and, in some cases, military force, diplomacy and negotiations. Ambassadors and diplomatic personnel play a crucial role in representing U.S. interests abroad, negotiating agreements, and fostering international cooperation. Treaties, which are formal agreements between nations ratified by the Senate, and executive agreements, which are negotiated and approved by the President, serve as binding instruments for codifying international commitments and partnerships. Economic statecraft. The U.S. frequently leverages its economic might to advance its foreign policy goals. Trade agreements and policies can be used to open new markets for American businesses or incentivize other nations to adopt specific policies or practices. Conversely, trade sanctions and embargoes can be employed to exert economic pressure on countries deemed to be acting against U.S. interests or violating international norms. Military force and deterrence. While diplomacy and economic tools are preferred, the U.S. reserves the option to use military force when vital national interests are threatened. The projection of military power can also serve as a deterrent, dissuading potential adversaries from engaging in hostile actions. Challenges in making foreign policy. Formulating and implementing an effective foreign policy is a complex endeavor fraught with numerous challenges that policymakers must navigate. Balancing competing national interests. The U.S. often faces tough choices in balancing its various national interests, such as promoting human rights versus maintaining strategic alliances with nations that violate civil liberties. Economic interests, like securing access to vital resources or markets, may at times conflict with other foreign policy priorities. Domestic political dynamics. Foreign policy decisions are subject to the push and pull of domestic politics. Partisan divisions, divergent ideological perspectives and the influence of special interests can complicate the policymaking process. Public opinion can also constrain or compel policymakers' choices, particularly on high-profile international issues, adapting to a changing global landscape. The international system is constantly evolving, with new challenges and power dynamics emerging. The rise of China as a global economic and military power, the resurgence of Russia's assertiveness on the world stage, and the proliferation of non-state actors like terrorist groups have all necessitated shifts in U.S. foreign policy strategies. Major foreign policy issues and decisions. Throughout its history, the United States has grappled with a multitude of complex foreign policy issues and decisions, each with far-reaching implications for the nation and the world. The Cold War. The decades-long ideological and geopolitical struggle between the U.S. and the Soviet Union defined much of American foreign policy in the latter half of the 20th century. Containment of communism, nuclear deterrence, proxy wars, and the space race were all facets of this epoch-defining conflict. The War on Terror. In the wake of the September 11th terrorist attacks, the U.S. launched a global effort to combat international terrorism, including military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as enhanced intelligence gathering and counterterrorism operations worldwide. Economic engagement with China. As China's economic clout grew, the U.S. pursued a policy of engagement, granting China permanent normal trade relations and supporting its accession to the World Trade Organization. However, tensions have since risen over issues like trade imbalances, intellectual property rights, and China's human rights record, nuclear proliferation. Preventing the spread of nuclear weapons to rogue states and terrorist organizations has been a long-standing foreign policy priority for the U.S. Diplomatic efforts, sanctions, and military action have all been employed to address nuclear threats from nations like Iran and North Korea, climate change, and global health. In recent years, addressing global challenges like climate change and pandemics has become a more prominent part of the U.S. foreign policy agenda. International cooperation, aid programs, and multilateral agreements have been pursued to tackle these transnational issues. Making foreign policy is a complex and dynamic process that requires balancing myriad national interests, navigating domestic political currents, and adapting to a constantly shifting global landscape. By employing a range of tools, from diplomacy and economic statecraft to military power, the United States seeks to shape the international environment in a manner conducive to its security, prosperity, and values.